Hello, my dear Franken friends, and welcome to Spookyou, your one-stop shop for all things ghastly and ghoulish. I'm your host, Barnabas Vixen, and my, do we have a tasty assortment of tantalizing tales for you today. Handpicked by our very own Weavers of Woe. Guaranteed to send a chill down your spine, or your money back, so is non-refundable. But enough teasing, because you're here for the stories, aren't you? Well, without further ado, allow me to pass the reins on over to our vivacious voiceover virtuoso, TREY FALCO, for the first of tonight's spooky stories. And I'll be seeing you real soon. That is, if this doesn't spook your eyeballs out first.
These events started in 2012 when I moved into a converted fire station that was built in the late 19th century. I was 27 at the time and of sound mind and decent physical health. I've always been fascinated by all things paranormal, but at the time, I would have considered myself a non-believer. Strangely, in spite of my experiences, I would still consider myself a skeptic. I've told this story many times and have considered writing it out for years, but just never really found the time until today. So buckle up, this could be a long one. I moved into the top floor of the duplex in the fall of 2012. This building was beautiful. It had a brick facade with climbing ivy vines, a large bay window on the ground level, and French doors leading to a wrought iron Juliet balcony on the second level. It looked like it had been plucked out of some pastoral French country province and precariously placed in my unremarkable American Midwestern hometown. And I've been in love with it since the moment I laid eyes on it. On moving day, I met my downstairs neighbor, Roger. He was extremely friendly and helpful, albeit constantly drunk. He had knocked on my back door to let me know that I was welcome to park under the carport or use his furniture on the back patio. He gave me a framed copy of an old photo of the house as a fire station, which I still have somewhere, and told me some general history about the building. The firehouse was built in 1890, but was converted into 2 apartments in 1910. It was the town's first fire brigade, and at the time, fire trucks were still being pulled by horses. Roger's apartment would have been the horse stable and garage, and my apartment would have contained the sleeping quarters, kitchen, and presumably some sort of office for the fire chief. Towards the end of my first week of living in my new home, I was unpacking boxes on the living room floor with my dog and cat curled up at my side. I was nearing the bottom of my last box when I heard 3 distinct knocks at my front door. At first, I just assumed it was Roger coming to tell me about trash day or the laundry situation or some other mundane aspect of duplex life, so I got up to answer the door. I realized how late it must be for a neighborly visit as I'm walking towards my door, and just before I reach for the knob, I stopped because I suddenly remembered that this is an interior door. There was an exterior door at the bottom of the stairs as well as an interior door at the top of the stairs that led into my house. Though it is possible for someone to have a key to the lock on the exterior door, it was a deadbolt that had a switch mechanism that disabled the key function from the inside. I always used this switch to lock myself in at night, and was fairly certain that I had on this occasion as well. I somehow managed to survive the knocking situation without being too weirded out. As I previously stated, at the time of moving in, I didn't really believe in ghosts or entities or whatever you choose to call them. I figured that there was a rational explanation for the knocking, and a small part of me believes that there still may be one, but nevertheless, things were quiet and uneventful in the house until December. I woke up one morning freezing cold, and it smelled salty. I couldn't really place the smell. It wasn't good or bad, it was just foreign to me. I walk out of my bedroom towards the kitchen and I notice that it is loud in my house. It sounds like cars are driving through my dining room. And that's when I see that the French doors that lead to the Juliet balcony are wide open. It had snowed a few nights before and the vehicles in the street below were now rolling their tires through the melted ice and mud. The sounds from the busy road were ricocheting off the now insulated ground and echoing through the inside of my house. That unusual smell was the brine that our city uses to coat the streets after a snowstorm. Now, typically, my balcony doors were each secured into the door frame with a sliding lock, and there was an additional set of screen doors that were kept closed with a hook and eye, which was still attached. Much like the last strange occurrence, I'm almost positive that I had securely locked the doors after the last use. But even if I hadn't, the whole door system fit too snugly into the frame to be blown about by the wind. Since the outer screen doors were still attached, I'm sure that no one climbed the ivy in the dead of night and broke in via the balconette. Hi everyone. Here's another weird experience that happened when I was staying at the apartment where other strange things have happened to me. See previous posting. Once again, I lived at this apartment over 5 years ago. This experience I actually shared with an old friend of mine who was staying with me for a week. This didn't just happen to me, which actually made it a little less scary for me, since usually stuff would happen only when I was alone. My friend, who I will call L for privacy, had come over during his vacation time from work and decided to stay with me. He was living in a different state at the time. He would visit with his family during the day, then come back to the apartment at night to sleep. Towards the middle of the week, I finally had a day off from work the next day, and we agreed to hang out that night. He picked me up at my job after work. This was almost around 10 p.m., and we picked up some takeout and drove to the small park in my apartment complex to eat. We walked over to one of the 2 picnic tables that were at this park. We were only there for maybe an hour, just eating our food, reminiscing about old times and just joking around and having a good time. Suddenly, I felt some really heavy energy in the atmosphere. It was a familiar but still creepy as hell feeling. I kind of froze up and got really quiet and had the urge to get up and look around. I ignored what I was feeling and I stayed sitting at the table, and L was now giving me a funny look. He asked me if I was okay, and I told him yes. I was starting to get used to this stuff just randomly happening, and I didn't want to make a big deal about it to my friend. I then felt like someone was staring at me from a distance, and I got chills up and down my arms. Apparently my friend had some sort of strange feeling too, because I saw him slightly jump up in his seat at the same time that I got this feeling. We looked at each other and were quiet for a few seconds, and then he asked me if I all of a sudden felt cold. I told him yes, I did, and then told him we should go back to the apartment. We got up and started picking up our trash. I walked away from the picnic table and went over to the trash bin, which was to my right near the sidewalk. I turned around and I see my friend had stopped picking up his trash since he was answering a text message on his phone. Well, right behind him on the second picnic table was a shadow figure sitting at the table. I froze and was completely getting chills all over. I automatically assumed, because of my sensitivity to these things, that I was the only one who could see it. My friend then noticed that I was staring behind him and he turned around. My friend then jumped back, dropping his phone in the process, and ran over to where I was in a panic. I asked him in a whisper if he could see it, and he whispered back to me, "Holy shit, is that real?" I told him I could see it as clear as day. We both froze up and stood there super quiet while this shadow just sat there, not moving at all. This figure had no discernible shape. It was not a shape of a person or anything. It was just a round black shadow that only had shoulders and a head. As I was staring at it, I started to get a sick feeling in my stomach, and I started to pray silently in my head that this thing would go away. Suddenly, it just randomly vanished. I swear, it must have been sitting there for almost the longest 2 to 3 minutes of my life. As soon as it vanished, we both ran straight to my friend's rental car, with him briefly stopping to grab his phone, jumped into the car, and locked the doors. L started the car, and as he was starting to back up out of the parking space, we both heard 2 bangs on the hood of his car. We screamed, and he literally did almost a burnout as he drove away from the park area. He drove fast as hell to where my apartment building was, parked in the first guest parking he saw. We then both literally ran like hell straight to my apartment. Eventually, after a long while, we both managed to calm down and talk about what happened. I explained to him the stuff that has happened to me since I moved to the apartment. He was completely freaked out and told me to come stay with him at his family's house because he didn't feel safe with me staying there alone. I explained to him that it didn't matter. This stuff happens to me all the time at random places, and it doesn't really matter where I go. After a while of him trying to convince me, I agreed, and we stayed at his family's house for the rest of the week. Obviously, I had to come back to my apartment after he left. He felt really sympathetic towards me and was genuinely afraid for me. He still lives in another state and calls every once in a while to check up on me. I, of course, avoided that little park in the apartment complex like the plague after that.
Delectable morsel of a story. Something short and sinister to get that blood flowing. Hopefully that'll hold you over while we talk about one of our sponsors, Big Frank's Body Shop. Frank is a frequent listener of Spookyou and has immeasurable knowledge when it comes to your body. Yes, you. Yours specifically. Every nook and cranny, every wrinkle and pore. Your very own biological mechanic. He has arms for when yours inevitably give out, various hearts and lungs to postpone that final breath. And right now, when you enter the coupon code SPOOKalicious at checkout, you'll receive 10% off your first purchase of $2,500 or more. Just enter SPOOKalicious at checkout for 10% off your first purchase of $2,500 or more. What a frighteningly good deal. That's Big Frank's Body Shop, because who could ever know more about your delicate body than old Frank here? Nobody. Not even you. Up next, we got a story so scary, you may just want to go ahead and mute your speakers now. It's okay, we don't judge around here. Okay, Frank judges a little, but it's warranted and you know it.
I've been to many holiday destinations in and around Europe, but one place always stands out. This place will remain anonymous, but it is nested on the west coast of England. The west coast is normally very beautiful, but this particular resort is one of the creepiest, somewhere I will never return. This story begins when I was 14 and my parents booked a holiday through an advert in the local paper. The place was cheap, too cheap for the peak season, but my parents thought it must have been a cancellation. The journey was long and I remember approaching the town with dread. The place was made of dark granite buildings surrounded by dark mountains and didn't have your average holiday town feel. The last town we passed was vibrant and picturesque, but this place was something out of the abyss. My mom assured me that it would get brighter as we got nearer to the sea, but we entered a thick forest area that seemed to lead to a dead end. We eventually saw the sign for the holiday apartments and continued up a very steep road that eventually brought us to our location. Once we made it to the top of the cliff, we were greeted with a very old and tired holiday complex. My first impressions of the apartment were neutral. The decor and amenities looked dated, but it was clean and tidy. The living room and kitchen were positioned at the top entrance of the apartment, and you walked down a dark corridor to the bedrooms and bathroom. The lower half of the apartment had a totally different atmosphere to the entrance. My bedroom was icy cold, with little to no light, and the bathroom felt like someone was hiding in there with you. We unpacked our stuff and headed out to explore the town. We were in the middle of August and the place was dead. Probably a handful of tourists and the shops were quiet, if not closed. Restaurants and pubs were in the minority and I couldn't see any sort of attractions or even visitor landmarks. As well as all this, the place had a gloomy feel. It felt like everyone had fled to escape something or someone, and I hated it. My parents tried to remain cheerful, but it was obvious they regretted coming here. We returned to the apartment and were met with an ice-cold chill. The corridor seemed darker than normal, and the feeling of being watched had returned. I didn't sleep well that night, and I kept hearing my dad pacing the corridor back and forth. He even came in to check on me and ask if I was okay. I eventually went to sleep and woke up relieved that I had survived my first night. We stayed a few days, but cut the holiday short to try a new town. The owner didn't seem surprised by this and made the comment that most people decide to leave early. It wasn't until we returned home that my dad revealed the true reason for cutting things short. He explained that every night he would hear someone moving up and down the corridor. He went out to check the apartment, but he could never find anything. He would also hear someone crying outside of my room. He thought it was me at first, but there was never anyone there and I was fast asleep. The scariest event happened on our last night. My dad claimed he woke up at 2 a.m. and heard voices coming from the living room. He initially thought he had left the TV on and went up to check. When he entered the room, the TV was off and nobody was there. He turned around to go back to his room and saw a black shadow move from the kitchen and towards the corridor. He ran out of the room, but nothing was there. He returned to bed but said he was again woken up by noises. He recalled hearing footsteps outside which stopped directly outside their bedroom. On inspection, there wasn't anyone or anything there. Earlier that morning, he had got to chatting with one of the locals who gave him the history of the town. Apparently 50 years ago, there had been a terrible storm which caused devastating flooding and killed hundreds of the town's inhabitants. Buildings were destroyed and part of the cliff top came away. It took a long time for the town to rebuild itself, and it was never the same again.
Welcome back, my darling deviants. Well, tell me, did you enjoy that twisted tale? Of course you did. I knew you had that air about you, that hunger for the horrific and the macabre. So, did we spook you? If not, then file a complaint with our complaint department detailing all accounts of non-spookiness you found in this video, and we'll get back to you in 2 to 3 millennia. Give or take a business eon or two. However, if you've enjoyed what you've just heard this evening, then make sure you leave a like on this video and annihilate that subscribe button. Such a small act of obedience is exactly what we need to put the food on the table around here. There's only so many days we can have refried kidney and toe jam hash before I'm absolutely sick of it. Spoiler alert, that ship sailed long ago. Now, I must bid you adieu. I've many things to take care of, and this outro is eating into my day off. Run along now. Have no fear, we'll be here every Tuesday and Thursday to bring you another terrible tale. Go forth, my ghastly gang, and stay spooky.